Look around you. Not just at the news, not just at your feed. Look around at the world, at your community, your neighborhood even. Look around at your life. Something is missing. You feel it, we all feel it. Modern life moves 1,000,000 miles a minute, but never lands anywhere. Social issues from the global down to the local stage feel like pervasive emergencies, but the needle seldom moves. There is a pull to return to the way things were, not just a mythic, distant past, but a time when things seemed more simple, a time where the future seemed more certain and the now felt less chaotic. At times, this pull comes from the highest levels of political power. At other times, it comes through in something as harmless as a meme. But this hollow feeling is pervasive. You can see it everywhere you look. Politics, infinite feeds of content, culture, even art. It is pervasive and yet almost impossible to put into words, and more difficult still to navigate. This way of living, a mile per minute but always stuck in place, is corrosive. It deteriorates all that it touches. The media, the shows and films we consume, the government structures that hold nations together, the basic international order, even the planet itself. It is corrosive to our very well-being. It is corrosive to life as we know it. But this corrosion isn't an accident. In many ways, it is the byproduct of decades, generations of choices that have been made at both the highest levels of government as well as the most intimate levels of the individual. And yet, it is also a product of something much deeper, the invisible pull of a riptide of history that holds us all in a vice grip while dragging us further and further from stable shore. It seems fitting then that, like a change in the tides, this moment of history that we find ourselves in is perhaps best described as an interstitial. An interstitial refers to the space between things, a moment where one thing has fallen away but something new has not yet taken its place. And while usually the term is found in ecology or biology, it is becoming more fitting to use it to refer to our place in history, the in-between moment that defines our current age. It is the everything crisis we find ourselves, however reluctantly, living through. And like the changing of the tides, the old ways of living, the old institutions, old paradigms, old dreams are either struggling through their last breaths or have already died out completely. But the new world, what comes next, has yet to be fully realized. It's not surprising to see this most clearly playing out on the global stage. Looming wars over who controls complex technological capabilities, who will control valuable natural resources, who will control the global economy, all proliferate with little being done to slow them down in any meaningful way. Massive economies are bracing for innovations that could dictate their own survival, or could leave millions of people or more in the dust. It plays out in less lethal arenas too. Generational shifts in media and news consumption, consolidation of something as basic as shopping, boiled down to an endless supply of monthly subscriptions. It is visible even in our individual lives and dreams for the future. Dreams like home ownership or lifelong careers with stable retirements to look forward to all seem laughably quaint now. And the connective thread between all these examples is their insecurity. Relatively speaking, even the heaviest trends and forces that have started to snowball in the 21st century are still fledgling forces, and most importantly, are far from certain. That means they can change. There's a reason why older generations seem hell-bent on going back to some mythical time where things were less complicated, or, more accurately, when things seemed less complicated. This is easy to see in politics, where the never-ending drive to bring back any number of lost job sectors or to make America great again has such strong appeal, not because people believe we can rewind the clock, though many certainly do, but because the future feels too fragmented to navigate. You can feel it in the nostalgia-fueled cultural loop too. Endless reboots, remakes, even the quiet return of suburban idealism. It's not just escapism. It's a longing for certainty and, in many ways, stability. And while it may not be fair to lay this entirely at the feet of older generations, it is also not surprising that many of them have less urgency around the long-term future. When you're not likely to be around for the worst potential consequences of climate change or AI disruption, it's easy to lean on comfort over confrontation. But that puts younger generations, specifically millennials and Gen Z, in a radically different position and with unique challenges. We can't afford to go backwards. We have to live with what comes next. Now, I am as prone to the feel-good blurring of history provided by 90s nostalgia as the next guy, but growing up in the 90s in America actually was a unique moment. It was the end of the Cold War, which had defined global politics for our parents' entire lives. It was the very start of the technological hyperdrive age that we are currently living through, and perhaps most importantly, growing up in the 90s meant that we were both the first and the last generation to grow up both with and without a ubiquitous internet. Every other generation was introduced to the internet either as adults, deepening its position as a novelty in average daily life, or was born into a world where the internet was already ever present, making it seem like a universal given. But growing up in this undefined middle, where we can remember life without the internet, but also live through the commercialization of it, is a position only millennials, and to an extent Gen Z, can totally understand. And that actually gives us a distinct advantage in the task of building a better future. One where the internet is not abolished, because that will probably never happen, but a future where our relationship to technology has changed. One where it is no longer our ruler. The reason our generation in particular is at an advantage here is at least in part because we are innately able to see the internet for what it truly is. Both the most powerful tool for human connection and achievement in all of history, and a potential curse so powerful that it possesses the ability to destroy the minds of its users. Millennials and Gen Z are of course not the only ones who can view the internet and its subsequent tendrils this way, but we do have a sixth sense for it. We have seen the world without it. We witnessed firsthand the impact it had on society and the individual as it evolved and became more and more intertwined with daily life. Much like smoking, the internet's detrimental effects are no longer contestable in any serious way. We know it's bad for us, and we know it isn't going away. But there is another factor playing in our generational favor as well. The inescapable, crushing weight of time. Presidents are old. Members of Congress are old. That's not so much a value judgment as much as it is a statement of fact. Of the 535 members of Congress, 257 of them are baby boomers or older. Only 85 members are millennials or Gen Z. And regardless of how you might feel about Donald Trump, 78, Joe Biden, 82, Nancy Pelosi, 85, Chuck Grassley, 91, or any other member of this aging cohort, it's just simply a fact that they won't be around forever. It's likely that they won't even be around for much longer. But these 21st century trends and forces and their consequences will. Baby boomers long held the trophy for the largest generation in America by population, but that hasn't been true since 2019, when they were overtaken by millennials. And unlike boomers and what's left of the silent generation, millennials have something else working in their favor. Many, many more years on this planet. The duty this presents to younger generations is likely becoming obvious. We have the two ingredients needed to create civilizational level change: population and time. But this duty extends further than just the halls of government and academia. Remember, it's not just the marble columns and ivory towers that have started to erode. It's the rest of the connective tissue that holds society together as well. We can see this most obviously in media, where print media as a means of news consumption plummeted long ago, and TV news seems to become more and more obsolete every day. In its place, digital platforms, apps, influencers, and podcasts are all gaining ground, thanks in large part to their user base, which is almost entirely younger. We see it in higher education, where Gallup surveys show massive drops in American confidence in higher education, from 57% in 2015 to just 36% in 2023. And we can see it in the zeitgeist, or just the overall vibe. Saying something like, "The American dream is dead," seems hilariously quaint. Have any millennials or Gen Z ever even thought it was alive to begin with? But for most of our parents' lives, saying something like this was blasphemy. Many other detrimental changes are beginning to take shape too. Unaffordable apartment buildings where there used to be single-family homes. Big box stores or subscription services where there used to be mom-and-pop shops. Pump and dump schemes where there used to be investment opportunities. Endless remakes where there used to be art. This toxic concoction of government inadequacy and a hollowing out of the social, cultural, and institutional norms that once seemed so fundamental to American life is further exacerbated by an ongoing, relentless, and accelerating pace of technological change. At their core, all of the issues we face today are either driven by this concoction or are a direct product of it. With each passing day, the collective everything crisis becomes more pervasive, more present in every aspect of modern life. But if we zoom out, check our emotions at the door, and look at our historical moment objectively, we can see the cracks of something meaningful beginning to shine through the chaos. There is an unmistakable hunger, desperate at times, to find a better way of being. And if this hunger is nurtured, it can have the power to transform the future into a golden age of human well-being. Let's look at one of the most interesting examples, the return to office mandates. Despite all of the chaos, all of the destruction to human life, to economies, and to politics that the COVID era brought on, there was one silver lining. It showed many of us that there was more to life than a never-ending slog through a 9-to-5 cubicle-based existence. In the earliest days of the COVID lockdown, before everything became so predictably partisan, the lockdowns almost had a resurrective quality to them. Now, of course, if you were one of the many millions of essential workers who didn't have the privilege of getting a couple weeks, or in some cases a couple years, off, this probably didn't apply. But setting that aside as much as we can for the moment, the first 2 weeks of lockdown felt for many like a much-needed vacation. More time with family, making nice dinners or watching movies together. People spent more time developing hobbies. Things as simple as baking homemade sourdough bread became momentarily as popular as binging all of Tiger King. And although it was far from universal, and while it was certainly short-lived, it was enough. This brief moment of rest, the forced halt to the rat race, gave many of us enough of a taste of what a better life could be that we have been fiending for more ever since. Suddenly, with the noise of the outside world forcibly turned down, many people had the freedom to collectively start to explore the things that really mattered to them. The gears of chaos, as we know now, would soon spin back up in spectacular fashion, overdrive even. But the clarion call had been sounded, and now, years later, we can see the consequences of it. Offices in downtown districts across America remain empty to this day. Calls from executives to return to the office are often laughed at, with many Gen X, millennial, and Gen Z employees banding together to shout that they would rather just as soon quit outright than be forced to sit in an office all day again. In no uncertain terms, and provided they have the means, many people would sooner choose economic insecurity than another second confined to a 9-to-5 existence. That is a massive shift from the 20th century, one that we are only starting to see the ramifications of. But of course, something much more sinister was happening behind the scenes at the same time. Corporations, the ones with enough foresight to see what was coming at least, rode the tidal wave of pandemic-era government spending and invested hand over fist in real estate, in companies, and in the stock market. According to some estimates, this created as much as $42 trillion of new wealth in the first 2 years of the pandemic alone, 2/3 of which has gone to the richest 1% of the world's people. This is not a call for political revolution. It is not a call to start rolling out the guillotines, but it is a warning of what is to come if we fail to seriously take on the generational duty presented to us at this moment in history. If we don't create the new institutions, new rules around what constitutes a good life in polite society, if we fail to create a world worth living in, someone out there will find a way forward. And if recent history is any guide, chances are good they will double down on packaging up the good life in a slick, app-based service sold back to us for a monthly subscription. They say you can't pour from an empty cup. That's true as much on the interpersonal level as it is in the collective. If we want to build a world where a happier, more meaningful life is not just possible, but more likely, we have to start living one ourselves first. There are as many answers to how to live a good life as there have been people around to ask the question itself, but a few paths seem to point in the right direction almost instinctively. Our primary focus should be our well-being. We must hold our collective ground. If returning to the office feels less like an opportunity and more like a sentence, don't do it. Find another way. Put your passions first. Painting, pottery, writing, creating that podcast or YouTube channel, getting healthy again, going on more hikes, spending more quality time with friends and family. Do the things that fill your cup. Don't waste your precious energy growing someone else's shareholder value. Reject the algorithm as the architect. Not every passion needs to be a side hustle. Step outside the digital dopamine loop. Create more than you consume. Design your life with intention, not reaction. Be your own architect. And perhaps most importantly, be ready to play the long game. Civilizational level change doesn't happen in 30-second clips or annual finance reports. It happens over decades, over lifetimes. Success here is almost entirely defined by our ability to be patient and diligent. We are a generation raised for a world that no longer exists, and part of the cruel irony is that it now falls on us to lay the foundation for a world we will likely never see. But the real progress will be made when we stop looking at that fact as a burden and accept it for the generational gift that it is, not just to find our way through this interstitial moment, but to frame what comes next. We live at a crossroads in the human story, one that the history books may well look back on as the moment when we decided what humanity's shared future will look like. And this moment in history may not be our fault, but shaping it into a future worth looking forward to is our responsibility.